Hey everyone, David Beebe here. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing really well. Today I've got a little mini lesson for you on how to go about learning to play through changes or glue chord changes together and get that sort of zoomed out big picture overview where you can relax when you see a scary chord chart and attempt to tackle playing through it. Quick little plug before we get started. Today's mini lesson is brought to you by and sponsored by my app, Solo. Tom Quayle and I had just released version 2.0 for iOS of our fretboard visualization app and the accompanying Ultimate Fretboard Visualization course as well. These two things are highly relevant to what we're talking about in today's lesson, and you could find very useful for taking your changes playing and visualization studies further. So if you want to check those out, they are linked in the description below. And if you use the code interval50 at checkout, you can get $50 off the Ultimate Fretboard Visualization course. And that'll be valid for a week after this video is published. And this is one idea that I call like interval tracking. So being able to play a note and then hold that note through the entire chord progression. And as each chord changes, be able to think in your mind and update and be consciously aware, how is this note changing, or how is its function of this note changing as the chord changes. So this is the exercise that we're going to do today. It's deceptively simple actually, in that we're only playing one note at a time, but we are mentally, and actually we're going to say this out loud as well, we're going to track exactly how that note changes its function as the chords change. I am going to assume in this video that you're at least familiar with what intervals are and have got the basic idea of thinking about notes functioning against a chord intervallically. If you don't know what I'm talking about, or all that is new to you, I'll link in the description below to an explainer video. This is taken from our Solo app, where I talk about what intervallic functions are, how to think about intervals on the fretboard more generally, and why that's so powerful and useful. So if that's new to you, do go away and watch that video first and then come back to this lesson. Okay, so somewhere around here you should see a chord chart for Autumn Leaves pop up. We're going to be looking at the first 8 bars where it goes C minor 7, F dominant 7, B flat major 7, E flat major 7, A minor 7 flat 5, D 7 flat 9, and then G minor 7, or G minor 6 it might be on the chart. And what we're going to do is play a single note. We're going to take a single chord tone from the first chord, so a chord tone from the C minor 7, and then we're going to hold that against every chord in that progression over those first 8 bars. We're going to look at the guitar neck and we're going to mentally track how does that interval change. So if I choose let's say I choose the 5 originally over the C minor 7, so if I choose the 5, as it changes into the F7, what is now the function of that note that I was playing? So let's work this through together, through the first 8 bars, choosing a single note of the C minor 7. Okay, I'm going to start and choose the flat 3 of the C minor 7. That would be an E flat, and I can find it here. So here's my C, I can find the flat 3 here. So I get this. It's the flat 3 against this current chord. Now as that changes to the F dominant 7, this is now going to be the flat 7 against the F7 chord. Okay, so it's gone from being the flat 3 of the C minor 7 to the flat 7 of the F7. And I can see that relationship change. Now as the chord changes to B flat major 7, this is going to become the 4 against the B flat major 7. It actually doesn't sound all that great, and we're going to do something about that later on, but for now, don't worry about it. If things sound wrong or don't work, we're not going to worry about that. We just want to be aware that this is the 4, know what's happening on the fretboard and with our ears. So after the B flat major 7, and where it's the 4, we're going to go to E flat major 7, and this note is now going to be the root. E flat, that's an easy one. Yeah, E flat. Okay, next the chord's going to go to A minor 7 flat 5, and then this has now become the flat 5 against the A flat minor 7 flat 5. Goes to the D7 flat 9 chord. Now it is the flat 9, so against the D, that E flat now is now flat 9. And then on the G minor, it's G minor 6, this is an interesting one here, so on the G minor 6, it's going to be the flat 6. That's a great example of where this is obviously wrong sounding. All along here, I'm verbalizing out loud what's happening. So my brain can't wander off and my fingers, think about coffee or lunch or whatever. I always find that by vocalizing things out loud, it forces you to be actually thinking and actually about what your fingers are doing. Guitarists, we all have this issue for our fingers to just run away and shut our brain off. And by forcing yourself to say things out loud, super helpful to staying on track. The next thing that we're going to do is to start making it map and make sense against the chords. So what we can now do is, as the chord changes, we can look at the note that we're holding on to and ask the question, does this note belong to the next chord as a chord tone? If it does, then we can stay on that note and we don't need to move it. We've glued the two chords together with a common tone. If it doesn't belong as a chord tone to the next chord that we're changing to, we can adjust that note by the smallest possible distance so it does become a chord tone of the next chord. So we do that by either moving down a half step, up a half step, down a tone, up a tone. And by that way, what we're doing is we're making the smallest possible distance connection, gluing these chord changes together. Now, we're doing this with just a simple exercise with a single note. But hopefully what you could perhaps imagine is that if you got really good at this, you can do it whilst playing an idea. You can take an idea and thread an idea and then make those ideas connect in this similar way. The other thing that I found this gave me, as I alluded to earlier on, is this sort of zoomed out big picture overview, this kind of relaxing feeling of being able to see a chord chart and to not panic about remembering what big shape I'm going to just spaff over it, and to be able to look at the detail of the chord and play something meaningful harmonically, even if it's not technically or lots of notes, impressive, whatever. Just be able to look at a chord chart and just know what the third is for each chord. Just be able to see what the 7 and the 5 is and find that on the guitar in the most efficient manner. The way that I'm finding these and thinking of this intervallically is by using the 2-point system, which is what Tom and I teach in our new Ultimate Fretboard Visualization course. We feel like this is the most efficient and powerful way of doing this sort of thing and playing through changes and visualizing the fretboard. You can, however, use whatever visualization system you like. You could be thinking and processing the actual note names in the chord. You could be utilizing a 3-note per string or a caged or a box kind of approach. Doesn't really matter. The important thing is that we're cognizant, we're consciously aware of the interval function of each note as the chords change. But now let's get into this second part of the exercise and start mapping and changing these notes to actually fit the chords as chord tones in meaningful ways via the smallest possible distance. Okay, so we'll start from the flat 3 of the C minor. I think that's where we started before. So C minor 7, first chord, and we've got the flat 3. Okay, so I'm going to play that and say flat 3. As the chord changes to the F7, I'm going to ask, is that flat 3, what is it of the next chord? Well, it becomes the flat 7. We got good at working that out. Flat 7 against F. The flat 7 is a chord tone, so I don't need to move it. I can maintain that common tone between the two chords, and I've glued the two chords together. I don't have to play anything different. I get to relax, take a breath, and I don't panic. So I've gone from the C minor 7, playing the flat 3, chord changes to the F7, and then I hold that note. It becomes the flat 7. Okay, as the chord changes to the B flat major 7, okay, this is going to become the 4 that we talked about against the B flat. Now this is definitely what we would refer to as maybe an avoid note or a handle with care note or a dissonant note. We wouldn't put into the harmony of this chord in this function, in this context. So we need to kind of do something about this, okay? Now, I can see that from the 4 here, if this was the 4, if I drop it down by a half step, it becomes the 3 of the B flat major, which is a chord tone. Obviously, it's not a common chord tone between the two chords, but it is the smallest possible distance that I can move to glue the two chords together. So going from the F7 with the flat 7 of this note, as the chord changes to this B flat major, it's just dropping down by a half step to the 3rd of the chord. And the 3rd, as you hopefully will know, is the strongest note, the strongest sound that you're going to get to identify the main quality of the chord type. So we've gone from outlining the 7th of the flat 7 of the F dominant 7th chord to the 3rd of the B flat major. Super strong harmonic choice, and melodically as well it will be strong because we're making these small voice-led inspired changes through the progression. Okay, so moving on to the next one. So as this, I'm holding this 3 against the B flat, as the chord changes to E flat major 7, this is now the 7. So it's the 7 of the chord, 7 of E flat major 7. It is a chord tone, so I could very well hold that note too. And I don't have to move, and I've glued and connected the two chords together. Okay, so as the chord changes to that A minor 7 flat 5, this will become the 4 or 11. And this again is one that I suppose we could hold it there, but it's not a chord tone. So to stick with what we're trying to do here, this exercise, I'm going to shift it. I'm going to move it by the smallest possible distance to make it a chord tone. So I can see that if I shift it up by a half step, it becomes the flat 5. So I've only had to play these 2 notes so far in order to play all through these chords and glue them together. So I'm just going to shift it up, back to the flat 5 here, back to the E flat, which becomes the flat 5 of this A minor 7 flat 5 chord. Okay, then the chord changes again to the D7 flat 9. Now this is an interesting one here because I'm playing an E flat, and that actually is the flat 9 of D7 flat 9. So because the flat 9 is in the chord symbol as written, I could hold that there and fulfill the requirements, the objective of the exercise. But I'm just going to stick to the 1, 3, 5, and 7. So what I will do here is just drop that back down to the root, to the D. And then we go to the final chord of the progression here. So we've gone to the G minor 6. And this now becomes the 5 of the G minor 6. That is a chord tone, so I can hold it again. So I'll play that through the track, and then I'll do it with a few more different chord tones. And then we'll start like cranking up the difficulty level here and giving you some more examples of how this becomes very, very useful. Okay, so it's the flat 3 of the C minor. That becomes the flat 7 of the F7 chord. It's going to become the 4 of the B flat major, so I'm going to drop it to the 3 of the B flat major. That hangs over into the E flat major 7 as the 7, so that's okay. Okay, it's going to become the flat 5. I'm going to move it up for the A minor 7 flat 5. I'm going to drop that down to the root for the D7 flat 9. And then I can hold it and it becomes the 5 of the G minor. So here's the 5. Starting on the 5 of the C minor 7. 5. I'm going to drop this down to the root for the F7. That's going to become the 5 of the B flat major 7. This will be the 2 or 9 of the E flat major 7, so I'm going to raise it back up to that fret for the 3 of E flat major 7. That becomes the flat 7 of A minor 7 flat 5. I'm going to have to drop that by a half step to the 3 of D7 flat 9, and then I'll raise that back up to the root for the G minor. I'll just reiterate again that I'm personally finding all of this information mapped out with what I refer to as the 2-point system, which is looking at the geometrically discrete interval function shapes that you can see. So a 3 looks a certain way, a flat 6 looks a certain way. That's the easiest, most efficient and powerful way, I think, to find information on the fretboard. But you don't have to do that. You could think of the pure note names. You could think of, like I say, using a 3-note per string approach or a caged approach. However you like, but we do have to find them somehow. Before we move on, I should say that you could actually choose any of the notes out of the chromatic scale and apply it to this and do this exercise against this chord progression. It kind of doesn't matter that they are notes that are not in the chord or not in the key. That's kind of the point. The point here is that you're training your mind and your visualization and your ears to be able to be consciously aware of how a note is functioning against any given chord. And so you could do that with any note. It's just that doing it with the chord tones as your basis and starting point is more representative, I guess, of how you would actually be playing, because if you want to outline the chord changes, we're going to be playing chord tones a lot of the time, and we need to get good at that. Now, one of the other things that I found this exercise and skill to be extremely useful for, one of the circumstances and situations it's massively beneficial to, is where your chord changes are more frequent, they're more complex. You're either changing keys or you've got seemingly randomly borrowed chords from other places, where you can't just force a single scale shape or a number of scale shapes over a whole progression, and you've got to think on your feet a lot quicker. So I'm just going to demonstrate it now with some other progressions. As I say, I'll do it with giant steps because that's another progression that's commonly known to non-jazzers. And obviously this is changing key frequently or tonal center frequently, and yeah, it's can be notoriously tricky to do. So you should see a chart for giant steps pop up somewhere around there. And we're going to start again doing it out of time, nice and slowly, talking it through, predominantly using chord tones as our starting points. So over that B major 7, first chord, I'm going to choose the 5. Okay, as that moves to the D7, that's going to become the 3. Okay, as it goes to the G major 7, that's going to become the 7. and then as it goes to the B flat 7, it becomes the sharp 5 or flat 6 there. So before we go any further, let's just stop and take a brief look in detail at these two bars and just to why this system, this exercise is so powerful in this case. Well, because if I'm going from the B major 7 to the D7, those two chords are pretty far apart really. Now, ordinarily, we would have to think potentially, if we were thinking about this in a more old school guitar way, of what is my big kind of shape to pattern to remember for the B major 7? What is my big shape or pattern to remember for the D7? Well, I don't have to do that here, because if I can see instantaneously the common notes or how to change notes to make them common between the two chords, I can sort of like parachute out of those shapes. I don't have to get stuck in these boxes as such. I can target the notes that matter. So over the B major 7, if I target the 5, the F sharp, and then as it changes to the D7, if I can see that's the 3 against the D7, then that's me being able to relax. I don't have to think of a large structure to work from and to sort of kind of pick my way through. I can instantly see that I've got the 5 of the B major 7 moves to the 3 of the D7. Similarly, as it goes to the G major 7 chord, that now becomes the 7 against the G. So over those first 3 chords, I could in fact just hold that one note. It's less for me to do. It's the glue, and it's gluing the chords together. Now, I'm not saying that musically we would do this or that's going to create a good phrase or language. Obviously not. But the point is, it's giving me the control, it's giving me the skill to be able to make better musical choices further down the line without having to be juggling hundreds or thousands of large, big structures. And on something tune like this, that has the potential to happen, especially for guitar players. Now, as we change to that B flat 7, this is going to be the sharp 5. This F sharp will be the sharp 5 or flat 6. That's not going to necessarily work here, so how do we fix that? Well, I can drop it down by a half step to the F. That becomes the 5 then of the B flat 7. So of those first 2 bars, I can tackle the whole thing by just like holding that F sharp for three chords and just dropping it to the F there on that last chord. Okay, so at this point you should hopefully get the purpose, the point, and the benefit to why we're doing all this. And what I'll do now is just demonstrate it a little bit more with giant steps perhaps. Now, as you can hear, this is not an inspired solo yet. It's not particularly even music just yet. But what I am able to do is to confidently and in a very relaxed manner just target chord tones with the smallest degree of movement on the fretboard without having to think and access of large, big shapes. And I can just be really relaxed in the moment as each chord goes by. And I've done that at a tempo where I can hopefully demonstrate it clearly and annotate it and think it through. I'll just say again that of course this isn't the only way for learning to play through changes or exercises that you can do. There's tons more different things to work on, and obviously you want to combine this with other aspects of musicality in terms of transcribing and listening, etc. But I do find that these kind of exercises and building good fretboard knowledge and good ear training skills helps you work out and understand the things that you are transcribing and language that you're developing anyway. So this is all like to come together in addition. This is not the only way of doing it. So I think I'm going to wind this lesson down. I hope it's been useful and interesting to you guys. If it has, do let me know in the comments. Are there any other kind of lessons that you'd like to see me do? And if you have any questions about it yet, drop those in the comments as well. I've really enjoyed doing this. I think I'm going to do more of these kind of mini lessons that sort of feed into the wider picture of what I'm so obsessed with on this subject of fretboard visualization, etc. And and of course, once more, this video is sponsored by the new Solar app 2.0 for iOS and the Ultimate Fretboard Visualization course. So if you're interested in getting further on some of the ideas I've been talking about today, actually looking at how to go about finding this information using the 2-point system, then that course would be a great thing to check out. Links are in the description, and also that discount code. If you use the code at checkout, you'll get $50 off currently. Thanks so much for watching, and maybe click that like button, ring the bell, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. And until next time, thanks, bye-bye.